They told Elena Drake her sister was dead in the same voice you'd use to announce a weather change. Not a murder. Not a battle casualty. A regrettable diplomatic incident, neatly folded into a dispatch from the Galactic King himself. That was how she knew it wasn't an accident. The king didn't send condolences. He sent an invitation. It arrived wrapped in ceremonial codes, like he'd plucked her grief off the vine and pressed it into something palatable. An audience at his throne, a chance to clarify misunderstandings. Any other diplomat would have declined. Elena accepted before the ink dried, smiling politely, because anger was a luxury she couldn't afford to show. Not yet. She had learned long ago that in the galaxy, humans were underestimated by default. Too young a species, too fragile in bone and lifespan, too sentimental in art. That was fine. Wolves smiled before they bit. The shuttle ride was silent except for the hum of the engines. Her escort, two spindly insectoid envoys with ceremonial spears, didn't make conversation. She didn't either. Words were weapons, and she didn't waste ammunition before the battlefield was set. By the time she stepped into the king's court, the game had already begun. The hall was as much theater as governance. Tiered balconies crowded with alien dignitaries, each species adorned in its cultural equivalent of finery. Scents of 100 worlds drifted through the air, carried on currents of warm ventilation. Elena noted, with a quiet tick in her mind, the subtle asymmetry in guard placement. A dozen soldiers to her left, 20 to her right. A corridor behind the throne, unguarded but locked by proximity fields. The Galactic King, Thurvax, lounged on his seat of carved obsidian. His robe shimmered with threads mined from stellar debris, and his crown pulsed faintly, as though alive. His eyes were the kind that calculated the worth of flesh before deciding whether to clothe it or consume it. "Elena Drake of Earth," he said, his voice amplified by the hall's resonators. "You honor us with your presence." She gave a shallow bow, hands loose at her sides, voice warm enough to pass for gratitude. "Your Majesty, thank you for the invitation. Though I confess, I'd have preferred a less tragic reason for the summons." A ripple moved through the balconies. The word tragic carried weight, but she said it like a weather report, not an accusation. Let them guess whether the frost in her tone was deliberate. The king's smile was thin. Your sister's passing was unfortunate. She was spirited. Such qualities are often misunderstood. Elena let the pause stretch, long enough for half the room to feel it. Yes, misunderstood. That's one word for it. He gestured to a servant, and a cup of amber liquid was placed before her. She didn't touch it. Instead, she glanced at the ceremonial guards, then back at the king. "You have quite the gathering today. An audience for our conversation." "Transparency," the king said, spreading his arms. "Our dealings should be witnessed by the galaxy." The truth sat beneath his words like a hook under bait. Humiliation was the real goal. Make the human kneel before witnesses, and Earth would learn its place. "Transparency's a fine thing," Elena agreed lightly. "Where I come from, though, we also believe in privacy when offering condolences." She smiled as though making a cultural observation, though her mind was already mapping exits, calculating timings. From the upper tiers, a silver-scaled dignitary chuckled. "Humans are always so delicate. One would think your species could be handled with a gentle touch." Elena looked up at him, smile widening by a millimeter. "Where I come from, sir, a gentle touch is often followed by a right hook." The laughter that followed was uneven, some genuine amusement, some discomfort. She filed away the faces of those who didn't laugh at all. The king leaned forward. "Earth is young. It thrives under protection. We could offer such protection if you were cooperative." There it was. The offer dressed as a threat. "Cooperative," she repeated, letting the syllables turn over in her mouth. "Your Majesty, forgive me, but on my world, when someone says cooperative, it often means do what I say or else." "Is that the translation here as well?" His eyes glittered. "Do not mistake our patience for weakness, human. We value your species, especially your women, for their rarity. It would be a shame if that value were squandered." Every guard in the room straightened. Some dignitaries leaned forward, anticipating her reaction. Elena just tilted her head, as though he'd commented on the weather. "My grandmother used to say," she replied softly, "you can measure a man by how he talks about women, when he thinks no one will remember his words." The king's expression flickered, just for a heartbeat, but she saw it. So did the elder alien in the far tier, whose gaze hadn't left her since she entered. "You have spirit," Dervac said at last. "Perhaps too much for your own good." "Funny thing about spirit," Elena murmured. "It doesn't tend to care what's good for it." She finally reached for the cup before her, lifted it to her lips, and set it down without drinking. "Your hospitality is noted, Your Majesty. But I didn't come here for refreshments." The hall shifted, voices quieting, attention sharpening. She folded her hands on the table, leaning in just enough to signal a change in tone. "You called me here to send a message. I hear it loud and clear. But there's something you should understand before this conversation goes any further." Dervax's crown pulsed faintly, a signal she guessed was private communication with his advisors. His voice dropped a fraction lower. "And what would that be, Ambassador? That I didn't come alone." The words weren't loud, but they landed in the hall like a dropped blade. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the king smiled again, broader this time, though the edges were brittle. "I see no escorts. No fleet. No armies." She met his gaze with the same calm she'd held since entering. "That's because the ones you should be worried about don't walk through the front door." The balcony stirred. Somewhere in the shadows, a translator whispered urgently in a language not meant for human ears. The elder alien's expression shifted from watchfulness to something like warning. Elena didn't look away from the king. "Your Majesty, I am here to be polite. I am here because my people believe in diplomacy. But where I come from, we also have a saying, you don't poke a mama bear." Dervax frowned faintly. "A bear?" "A predator," she said simply. "One that doesn't start fights, but ends them." The king's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" Elena smiled, warm as spring sunlight, and for the first time since she'd arrived, let the steel edge into her voice. "It's advice. What you do with it is your choice." The hum of the hall returned, muted but tense. She could feel the weight of their stares, the calculus shifting in minds that had walked into this meeting certain of human fragility. The king's fingers drummed once on the arm of his throne, then stilled. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, a low, almost imperceptible vibration began to hum through the floor, a signal only she knew was meant for her. Right on schedule. She didn't look down, didn't acknowledge it. Instead, she leaned back, the picture of ease, and let her gaze wander over the assembled species like a hostess deciding which guest to greet next. The king was still watching her when she said, almost conversationally, "I think we understand each other a little better now." His smile returned, but it was smaller, tighter. "We shall see, Ambassador. We shall see." She allowed a beat of silence, then gave the smallest of nods, agreement or challenge. Impossible to tell. "Yes, Your Majesty. We shall." And in the quiet that followed, with the vibration under her feet deepening and the elder alien's eyes narrowing in grim recognition, Elena Drake knew she had just set the first hook in a game that would end with a galactic king, learning exactly why you never, ever threatened a human woman. If you want, I can roll directly into Section 2, so the tension pivots into the private confrontation scene before the trap fully blooms. That way the escalation stays unbroken. Do you want me to continue immediately? Under the pretense of a recess, the courtiers filed out, voices low and speculative. Elena Drake was not dismissed. 2 guards flanked her, their insectoid limbs clattering in rhythmic steps, as they escorted her down a narrow hall lined with black stone and quiet malice. The air shifted here, cooler, stripped of the rich perfumes and warm lights of the audience chamber. She knew the terrain change for what it was. The king wanted the next part of their conversation without witnesses, and he wanted her to feel the isolation of it. The guards stopped at a set of arched doors. One pushed them open with a clawed limb, revealing a room that was all angles and shadows. A long, obsidian table ran down the center, its surface etched with maps of the star systems under the king's control. No refreshments here. No courtiers. Only the king seated at the far end, and a pair of silent sentries at his back. "Sit," Dervac said. She did, taking the second chair from the end rather than the one directly across from him. It was a small thing, but it disrupted the symmetry he might have been counting on. He noticed. His gaze flicked to the empty chair between them, but he said nothing about it. "You intrigue me, human," he began, his voice softer now, the public performance stripped away. "Your species, you arrive in our affairs with open smiles and curious eyes, yet you speak as though you know the ending to a story we have not finished telling." "Maybe I've just read enough stories to recognize the pattern," she said. Her hands rested loosely in her lap, posture relaxed but not careless. "A ruler extends his hand, says it's for protection, but there's a chain in the other hand. I'm from a world where we've seen that play before. We didn't care for the ending." His thin smile returned. "Ah, and yet here you are, at my table." "By invitation," she reminded him, her tone mild, though her mind was counting beats, measuring his cadence. "And I believe you said this was about clarifying misunderstandings." Dervax's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "There is no misunderstanding. Earth's position in the galaxy is precarious. You have technology, yes, but no fleets to match our armadas. You have soldiers, but no numbers to withstand our legions. Alone you are. Vulnerable," she finished for him, the word soft but edged. "Exactly," he said. "And so I offer you the security of alliance, a place under our banner. You will send tribute, soldiers, and resources. You will grant access to your population for mutual benefit." Her head tilted slightly. "Mutual benefit? The genetic vigor of your species is rare. Our breeding programs would ensure its survival on a galactic scale." She didn't flinch. "You mean you want human women?" He spread his hands. "I mean we want a future where human bloodlines do not vanish in the dark. You should be grateful we wish to preserve them." Gratitude. She almost laughed, but didn't. Instead, she let a moment pass, as if considering the offer, as if the weight of his words was sinking in slowly. She knew the pause would feel like a victory to him. "You're forgetting something," she said finally. "And what is that?" "That we get to decide what survival looks like, and who we trust to help us get there." His smile thinned. "You would refuse protection out of pride? Your species' arrogance will be its undoing." "Maybe," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But we've also learned something else about protection. If it's forced on you, it isn't protection, it's captivity." The sentries behind him shifted subtly. They didn't move closer, but their weight tilted forward like predators scenting a shift in the air. "You think you can stand against us," Dervac said, voice dropping, "when your kind is barely out of its cradle." She met his gaze without a flicker. "We grew teeth in that cradle." He leaned forward, forearms resting on the table. "Your defiance is inconvenient. You would do better to be pragmatic. We could make this painless." "Painless," she repeated. "On my world, that's a word used by people who are about to hurt you and want you to hold still for it." The king's eyes narrowed. "You're bold for someone who came here without an army." She allowed herself the faintest smile. "You're assuming I came without one." A tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth. He recognized the provocation, but couldn't quite ignore it. "I see no soldiers, no ships in orbit." "They're not the kind you'd notice," she said. "And they don't wait in orbit. They wait in systems you think are yours." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, deliberate. Somewhere behind the walls, faint hums shifted in pitch, like the subtle change in a predator's breathing before it moves. He tried to read her. She gave him nothing but a calm face and the patience of a chess player who knows the board better than the opponent. "You're bluffing," he said finally. "You think so?" She let the question hang, then added, "Do you know what poker is?" His brow furrowed slightly. "A primitive human ritual?" "It's a game," she said, "about reading your opponent, knowing when to push and when to walk away. Sometimes you win with the worst hand, if the other player's too scared to call." "You expect me to be frightened?" "I expect you to remember this moment," she said, "and wonder later if you should have made a different choice." The guards shifted again, exchanging a glance. One's mandibles clicked faintly. Dervax leaned back, his expression hardening. You have courage, I grant you that. But courage without power is just a prelude to surrender. That's the thing, Elena said softly. Power isn't always about what you can see. He studied her for another long beat. We could take Earth tomorrow. We could strip your defenses before your people even knew we were coming. She nodded once, as though conceding the point. You could. And then what? You'd hold a world full of people who don't like being told what to do. We've overthrown empires bigger than yours before we even left our own atmosphere. Do you know how we did it? His eyes narrowed, the faintest sign that she'd needled something he didn't like. We learned to smile while we planned your downfall, she said. The words landed like a low note on a war drum. The king's sentries shifted uneasily. The air between them thickened. You speak as if war is inevitable, Dervax said. That depends on you, she replied. Where I'm from, we believe in peaceful coexistence. But we also believe in meeting force with force. And we don't start fights we can't finish. He was quiet for a long moment, then stood, the movement sharp enough to draw the sentry's attention. Perhaps I've been too subtle. Let me be clear. If Earth does not submit to our terms, I will take what I want. And you will not stop me. Her gaze stayed on his face, calm, measuring. I think you just made the mistake you'll regret for the rest of your reign. He tilted his head, mock amusement in his eyes. And why is that? Because now, she said, rising slowly from her seat, this isn't just diplomacy. This is personal. The vibration in the floor deepened, subtle but steady. The king glanced down, then back at her, his expression hardening into suspicion. You want to be careful with the next words you say, she continued, voice low enough that only he and the sentries could hear. They might be the last ones you speak as a king. For the first time since she entered his domain, Dervax didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened. The hum beneath their feet grew imperceptibly louder, as if the walls themselves were listening. And Elena Drake, with the faintest smile, knew the first move of her real game had just been played. The first alarm was faint, a low chime that rippled along the obsidian walls like water disturbed by a stone. Dervax's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, but before he could speak, a second alarm followed, sharper, more urgent, underscored by the high-pitched wail of breach sirens. The sentries behind him stiffened, mandibles twitching, but Elena Drake didn't so much as glance up. She was still standing by the table, hands loosely clasped in front of her, as though she were discussing the weather back home. What is this? The king demanded, his voice slicing through the room's stillness. I'd say it sounds like trouble, Elena said mildly, but that would be underselling it. The sentries began to move toward her, their clawed feet clicking on the stone. She didn't step back. I wouldn't do that, she said, and her voice was so quiet it barely carried past the nearest guard. Your personal shield grid is about to fail, and when it does, you'll want every inch between us to stay exactly where it is. Almost on cue, the room's recessed lights flickered, then dimmed to half-strength. A faint shimmer that had been hugging the king's form, his personal defensive field, blinked out. Dervax's jaw tightened. What have you done? I brought a few friends, she replied, the same pleasant tone she might use to describe a picnic. Not the kind you've met before. They're very good with locks. The sirens shifted to a deeper, more resonant pitch. Somewhere beyond the chamber, a series of dull thuds reverberated like a heartbeat. The sentries froze in place, their orders from the king momentarily overridden by the instinct to identify the greater threat. I warned you not to mistake patience for weakness, Elena continued. I told you I didn't come alone. You assumed that meant soldiers. You assumed wrong. Dervax straightened, anger flashing in his eyes. You've breached my security protocols. No, she interrupted. I've rewritten them. Every door, every camera, every weapon system you own now answers to someone who answers to me. His voice turned into a growl. Impossible. You really should stop using that word around humans, she said. We treat it like a dare. The table between them lit up, the etched star map shifting to display his flagship in orbit. Red indicators flared across its surface, one after another, in a pattern that was both precise and relentless. Whole decks changed color, systems offline, engines disabled, weapons rerouted. The king's hand twitched toward the console built into his chair. The screen flared with the words, "Access denied. Administrative control overridden." One of the sentries finally spoke, its voice a metallic rattle. "Majesty, the fleet reports internal malfunctions. Defensive turrets are," it hesitated, "targeting our own ships." The king's gaze snapped back to her. "This is an act of war." "This is a demonstration," Elena said evenly. "An act of war would involve me letting my people finish what they started 5 minutes ago." He took a step toward her, fury radiating off him. "Do you think you can threaten me and walk out alive?" "You're thinking too small," she said. "This isn't about you walking away. This is about what the galaxy sees when you do." As if in answer, the table's projection shifted again, showing multiple live feeds, docking bays where his guards stood with weapons lowered, unable to fire, corridors where sealed blast doors had opened to reveal human operatives moving like shadows, the command deck of his flagship, where his own admiral stood frozen as the ship systems locked her out. Dervax's voice was tight, each word chosen to carry the full weight of his authority. "How?" She smiled slightly. "By being underestimated. Works every time." The sirens outside cut abruptly, leaving only the hum of the room systems, though now it was an unfamiliar hum, tuned to a frequency he didn't control. She stepped around the table, closing the distance between them without hurry. "You thought you invited a lamb to your court. You didn't notice the teeth because you weren't looking for them. You dare." "Yes," she said, cutting him off. "I dare. You threaten my people. You threaten the women of my world. Where I'm from, we have another saying, 'Don't write checks your body can't cash.'" His gaze burned into hers, but she saw it now, the faint shadow of doubt behind the fury. "You're bluffing," he said again, though softer this time. "You know what makes a bluff work?" she asked. "When it's not a bluff." The lights above them flickered again, and the projection table went black. When it came back on, the star map showed not just his territory, but 3 surrounding systems, all tagged with human fleet positions that hadn't been there before. "I told you they weren't in orbit," she said. "They were in the places you don't watch because you think no one would dare get that close." One of the sentries turned toward the king, its voice low. "Majesty, the outer sectors are confirming human presence. They were here before she arrived." "Before you sent the invitation," Elena added helpfully. "It's amazing what you can arrange when you let your opponent think they're in control." His hands curled into fists. "You came here to trap me." "No," she said. "I came here to give you a choice. This is me being polite." Politeness had never sounded so much like a threat. The air between them was thick now, the space charged with the knowledge that the balance had shifted entirely. For the first time since she entered his palace, the king was the one reacting to her. "Shut it down," he ordered. She tilted her head. "Say please." His teeth bared. "Shut it down. You still don't get it," she said. "This isn't a switch I can flip. This is leverage I can keep. And you have exactly one chance to walk away without losing more than you already have." "What do you want?" he asked, the words forced out like stones through a narrow gap. "An end to the trafficking," she said, voice cool. "A guarantee written and binding that human women will never again be targets for your breeding programs. And an understanding that any attempt to break that agreement will make today look like a friendly warning." The king's jaw worked, his pride warring with the reality of his position. "Think carefully," she said softly. "Every leader in this galaxy will know how this ends. They'll see whether you're smart enough to recognize when you've been outplayed." For a moment, the only sound was the slow, mechanical breath of the sentries. Then Dervax spoke, each word clipped. "And if I refuse?" She stepped back, letting her gaze drift to the table where his fleet maps still glowed with hostile red. "Then we find out how much of your empire you can keep before the lights go out for good." The vibration under their feet deepened again, almost imperceptible, but she knew what it meant. confirmation from her people that they were ready for the next stage if she gave the word. She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she let the silence stretch until it became its own kind of pressure, then said, "This is the part where you decide if you're going to be remembered as the king who adapted or the king who didn't." Dervax stared at her, and for the first time, she saw calculation replace outrage in his eyes. That was enough for now. The real victory would come in the next move. And somewhere deep in the palace's secure channels, a hidden transmission began its journey to every major power in the galaxy, proof of what had just happened, and a quiet reminder of why no one should ever threaten a human woman. The chamber was quiet now, but it wasn't peace. It was the breath before a storm changes direction. Dervax remained standing, his gaze locked on Elena like a man staring at an unfamiliar weapon, trying to guess which way it would fire. The sentries had gone still again, their focus divided between the king's safety and the alarms whispering from their comms. Elena took her time crossing back to the other side of the table, her steps unhurried, her hands loose at her sides. She moved like someone who had no need to hurry, because she had already decided how the day would end. "I don't enjoy this part," she said, her voice even. "You think I do, but I don't. It's exhausting, forcing someone to see what they've spent their life pretending doesn't exist." "And what is that?" the king asked, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "That you're not the only predator in the room." His crown's faint pulse quickened, a private signal she suspected was him summoning reinforcements. She let him keep the illusion. "You've mistaken kindness for compliance," she went on. "You saw patience and called it weakness. That's your mistake. But the greater mistake, the one you won't walk back from, is thinking you could threaten my people and still decide the terms of this conversation." A low vibration tremored through the obsidian floor. It was subtle enough that only someone expecting it would notice. She knew what it meant. Her people had total control. They were waiting for her to say one word. Dervax's jaw set. "You speak as though you've already won." "I speak as someone who has stopped playing the game you thought we were playing." He moved toward her, slow but deliberate, testing her composure. She didn't shift. "You think you can dictate terms to me in my own palace?" "Not think," she said, leaning forward slightly, her voice lowering to something that carried a blade under silk. "No." The table's star map shifted again. This time, it showed the king's fleet entirely blacked out, systems unpowered, weapons disarmed, communications dead. Ships drifted in space like enormous carcasses. The red markers that had previously indicated human presence now glowed green, each tagged with an Earth fleet crest. "You've disabled my empire's heart," he said, but it wasn't accusation. It was dawning comprehension. She studied him. "No, Your Majesty. I've shown you how easily it can be done. You still have a heart because I haven't decided to crush it yet." From somewhere above, the distant clatter of boots, alien reinforcements, finally answering his silent summons. Elena didn't turn. She lifted her wrist and tapped her comm once. The sound of marching stopped mid-stride, replaced by nothing. Whoever had been coming for her wouldn't arrive. "I told you I didn't come alone," she said quietly. "They're not outside your gates. They're in your systems, your corridors, your shadows. And they answer to me." Dervax's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" She allowed herself a moment to let the question hang, because it was more than a concession. It was the acknowledgement of her position. "You will sign a treaty banning any trafficking of human beings. You will dismantle every program, every pipeline, every unofficial channel that even thinks about targeting Earth's women. You will make it law in your territories, punishable by death, and you will enforce it." His voice was colder now, stripped of its theatrics. "And if I agree, I leave with my people. Your systems come back online. Your fleets return to your command. You keep your throne. And if I refuse?" She glanced at the table's projection, now zoomed out to show neighboring systems, some with human fleets positioned at the edge of his borders, others already within them. "Then I pull one thread," she said, "and your empire unravels faster than you can send a distress call." He studied her for a long, tense moment. "You'd burn half the galaxy to make your point?" She met his eyes, her tone steady. "Not half. just enough that the rest never forget the lesson. One of the sentries shifted, its claws rasping lightly against the floor. The king didn't notice. His focus was locked entirely on her. Why should I believe you'd stop once you start? Because if I wanted to destroy you, you'd already be gone. He exhaled slowly through his nose, the sound almost like a hiss. You're asking me to kneel? No, she said, I'm asking you to survive. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unbroken. Then, with a sharp gesture, he signaled one of the sentries. A data slab was brought forward, the treaty framework already taking shape as she had sent it earlier, quietly, in anticipation of this exact moment. Dervax read it once, twice, his jaw tight. You've calculated this well. I had good motivation, she said. He signed, his stylus carving the alien equivalent of a royal seal into the slab. The sentry withdrew with it, vanishing into the shadowed hall beyond. It's done, he said. Not yet, she replied. When the treaty's enforced, when the first trafficker swings from your execution beams, then it's done. His eyes hardened. You're going to watch me? I'm going to make sure the galaxy watches you, she said. For the first time, his gaze flickered, not with fear, but with the understanding of exactly how much damage her kind could do without firing a single shot. You've won, he said. She straightened, the faintest curve of a smile at the corner of her mouth. No, Your Majesty. I've reminded you who you're dealing with. She tapped her comm twice. The star map shifted again, showing his fleet systems rebooting one by one. Power returned to ships. Communications channels flickered back online. To anyone watching from outside, it would look as though a strange malfunction had suddenly corrected itself. Why let me keep it? He asked. Because the real move, she said, turning toward the door, isn't taking the board. It's making sure every other player saw how close I came to flipping it. At the threshold, she paused, looking back at him one last time. This wasn't about you. It was about everyone watching. And with that, she walked out, her escort falling into step. The corridor beyond hummed faintly with the restored power, but under it all, there was a different kind of hum, one that came from the knowledge that a lesson had been delivered not in whispers, but in a way that would echo through every court, every council, every backroom deal in the galaxy. Somewhere far above, human ships slipped into the fold of faster-than-light transit, leaving the king's world behind. But they didn't vanish. They lingered just beyond the edges of his awareness, a reminder that the Queen of Wolves, as some would already be calling her, didn't need to be seen to be present. In the privacy of her shuttle, Elena exhaled, the first unguarded breath she'd taken since setting foot in the palace. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what had just been secured, not for her, but for every human woman who would never know how close she'd come to being a pawn in someone else's game. She opened her eyes again, gaze steady as the stars stretched into lines. There would be other games, other tables, other kings. And she would play them all the same way, smiling, until it was time to show her teeth.